So today I'm going to teach you what the law of syllogism is. So it's a rule used in logic and in geometry. So here's the formal definition. I did write it in my own words to make it simpler. It does say a rule of logic that allows you to connect two true conditional statements to form a new conditional statement. If you don't know what a conditional statement is, I am going to post a video. There is a video actually already, so you can go and watch that. So typically a conditional statement includes an if-then statement. So in this case we're talking about the law of syllogism. I have two examples, a real-life example and a geometry example. So let's start with a real-life example. I always think it's best, if you really want to understand something, to use a real-life example instead of using a geometry example or a math example. So here's the first example that I have here. So we have the first statement. So this would be the first statement. If you skip breakfast, then you get hungry. So you can see this is an if-then statement. So this is the first conditional statement, and then we have the second conditional statement. If you get hungry, then you lose focus. Now, if you notice a pattern here, the first if statement in the first conditional statement, if you skip breakfast, and you see the second statement, then you get hungry. We move that second one to the second statement, the second if-then conditional statement. So if you get hungry, then you lose focus. And then we have the third statement. If you skip breakfast, then you lose focus. So we're connecting these two statements to form the final conditional statement. And if you notice a pattern here, you could see that in the first conditional statement, the second part of it, then you get hungry, moves to the second conditional statement, becomes the first if statement. So if you get hungry, then you lose focus. And then for the last conditional statement, we start with the first if statement in the first conditional statement, and then we end with the last part of the second conditional statement. It may be a bit confusing, but if you practice, it's going to make sense, and you will notice the pattern. So if you skip breakfast, then you get hungry. If you get hungry, then you lose focus. If you skip breakfast, then you lose focus. So you see how we're connecting those first two conditional statements to form that third conditional statement. So this is a real life example. It helps you kind of understand it, but let's move on to a geometry example. I'm just gonna write this here, real life example. Okay, so this is the geometry example. And you'll notice the same pattern. So here we're using segments. Again, I have a video on what a segment is. You can go back. I will try to attach that video on this one so you can find it, but you should be able to find it in my geometry list. So here we're starting with that first conditional statement. I'm just gonna number it 1, 2, and then 3. So you see in the first statement, if a segment has a midpoint, then it is broken into two congruent segments. So if you remember what a midpoint, I have all of these videos. You can go back and learn them. They're in my list. Again, I'm posting all these videos. I'm learning from geometry textbooks, from basics to more advanced. So everything I want to try to do sequentially, so that you have a strong foundation. So let's start here. So if a segment has a midpoint, then it is broken into two congruent segments. And that's exactly what we understand about midpoints. A midpoint separates a line into two congruent segments. Now again, with these conditional statements, we're assuming that they are true. That's why we're able to follow this sequence of logic, right? So if a segment has a midpoint, then it is broken into two congruent segments. And then if you remember that pattern that we had before, this part here, this part moves to the first part of the second conditional statement, right? So if a segment has a midpoint and is broken into two congruent segments, if two segments are congruent, then their lengths are equal, and we know that to be true. Now you can see the pattern continuing. We're going to start in that third final conditional statement. We're going to take this if statement and we're going to move it to the beginning. So if a segment has a midpoint, then it is divided into two equal segments. So I think these lines help a little bit. So again, you see this becomes the last then statement in the last conditional statement. So this is what the law of syllogism is. It connects two true conditional statements to form a final conditional statement, and you can see that there is a pattern. Again, if you go to the real life example, you can draw these same lines that I put here to just connect it to make it easier for you to understand. I hope this was clear. If you liked the video, please subscribe and put a like on the video. Thank you.